Hi, welcome to the video tutorial for the last lesson in the equations algebra strand. It's lesson 26. There's lots of names you could give it, chunking, there's lots of names you could give it, but essentially you're asking the children to construct multivariable quadratic equations to prepare them for the type of equations they're going to need to do when they're in Key Stage 4 and beyond. So you give them a chance, we're using a real life situation, to construct equations that come from the variables that affect the products we buy. And that then is the kind of equations they need to deal with unaided when they get to year 10, year 11, if they touch upon higher aspects of math. I saw a lovely lesson that resonated with this where a teacher was asking a very bright year 10 class to work out use Newton's equation to work out the gravity on each different planet. And I thought that was really lovely, but I'd recently, just before I taught this lesson, I thought actually what I'm asking them to do in year 8 is preparing for that. It is lesson 26, so it comes at the end, so it's difficult. You might want to break it up. But there are three parts of the lesson. There's an introduction where you're asking them to add up chains of numbers, whole numbers and then decimals, and all they have to do is chunk them to make it easy. Like 1.8 would you'd add to 2.2 to give you 4. Why would you do that? Why would you chunk things together? So there is a little starter that you can flash on the board. But there are two main activities for the children to address in the lesson. So starter can take 5 minutes. It can just be one of those like warm-up activities when the children come into the room. Okay? So, the first part of the lesson is about buying jewellery. You have a chain and a pendant. And what you tell them is for every centimetre of chain of gold is half a gram. The pendant weighs 12 gram. The price of gold is £13 per gram. Make up a length of chain and work out how much your chain costs. So the scenario is someone's working in jewellers. How does the jeweller quickly work out the price of the total product? Because people will come and change it. So what the children do is they come up with a price for their chain. And they say, well, how did you work it out? So they then have to construct an equation based on the fact that if the chain is 24 centimetres long, that's 24 times by a half, which is 12 grams. The pendant is 12 grams. Gold is £13 per gram. So what you've got to do is you've got to do something like 13 times by 24 times by a half plus 13 times by 12. And they can simplify that. You could say, what if you didn't know the length of the chain, and then you could substitute a letter variable in. That's the first part of the lesson. That's the first part of this activity. The second part of the activity is you say, okay, a chain costs £224. How long is it? Or whatever, depending on the price of gold, because it changes. So they might even want to come up with a variable for that, because you don't know what the price of gold is. So you could end up saying P. So there's a lot. These parts of the lessons are very, very rich where the children share their constructed equations. Some of them won't have done that. Then others will share it. Some will have one variable and some of them brought two variables in. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of mediation needed for them to decide what is the best way of writing this down. Then you say, okay, some people like to add initials. So I can put Alan Edmiston plus Nicola Edmiston, in love forever. How much would, if I wanted to add 5 symbols to my pendant, how much would it cost? Because each symbol, each letter costs £7. How would you add that to your formula? And then the final part is, what if you buy 10 chains and you get a discount of £15, 15%? How would you write that as an equation? You're constantly making the equations more complicated based upon the reality that with gold chains they add initials. My sister did when she got married on the bling she bought for her and her husband. And it's a really interesting activity where they've got, because what I think is interesting is sometimes when you're dealing with year 8s, unless you focus them, they don't actually use the knowledge that they've got. So this is lovely because in a class of say 26 students, as I saw in a school in Birmingham, you will get a whole range of answers and they go, oh yeah, it is, we've got to do this, we've got to put P in because we don't know what the price of gold is. So you could say, well, it's P times, it's 12p plus 12p. Well, that's interesting. So there's very rich activity. The second part of the lesson involves a scarf, where you show them a scarf and you just say, well, how big was the material that the scarf came from? Was it the same? Was it this size? No, it's a bit bigger because you've got tassels and you've got a hem. So how can you construct an equation like the ones we've done to acknowledge the fact that the starting piece of cloth for the scarf is bigger than the scarf itself, because you've got a little bit here that forms the hem, but also you've got the tassels. So what equation could you come up with to explain how big the cloth needs to be? And that's in essence the final part of this lesson, that the children go away and construct an equation, which is just the area of a rectangle, add a bit extra onto the width and add a bit extra onto the length. But you're forcing them to manipulate these variables and develop equations that help them to work out the price, because a scarf needs extra material, so maybe you have to add something on to the price to cater for that. So it's not just the price of this scarf, it's the price of the additional material you needed at the beginning. Now that's lesson 26, and it really is interesting and worth exploring. Again, it can work with older pupils, but imagine doing that with the early class, pushing them, increasing their diet using these activities. What kind of learners are they going to be like in Key Stage 4? What kind of questions are you going to be asking them? So one of my children, in her class, the teacher often just gave her stuff that she didn't teach with the class because she didn't need to. Most of the class were working at, grade B. My eldest got an A star. She was just given extra stuff. And she didn't like that in the end because she said, I'm just bored. Imagine if they'd worked together, collaborating like this, where it's not the answer that's important, it's the quality of your thinking and the discussion and how you change your mind and spot more efficient ways of writing things down and similarities. So there isn't a wrong answer, it's more about the quality of your answer and how you articulate it. How do they articulate that we need the extra bits? How do they articulate what's going on in the jewellery? That's the kind of maths we want them to be able to do, because that's what they need to do when they leave school.